Okay, let's try this again. Second day of tech problems, but this is an important subject. And I am at Wichita Children's Home in Wichita, Kansas.
Yes.
And I am with Karen Countryman-Roswurm.
Correct.
And you are a therapist counselor of anti-sexual exploitation services.
Right.
Now, we talked about this yesterday in Denver. I don't even know where to begin. Homeless youth being sexually exploited. What do you see on a given day or week or whatever?
Well, maybe to kind of give you the picture of this, been working with runaway and homeless youth for a little over 12 years, and ended up working for the Midwestern Longitudinal Study of Homeless Adolescents. And once we realized that so many of the young people we were working with were involved in sexual exploitation of different forms, or labor trafficking or exploitation of different forms. However, it's hard to identify when it's domestic, because a lot of that might take place initially as survival sex.
Right.
So because they're on the streets, because they're so vulnerable, people are out to exploit them. And so they might spend the night at somebody's house and just happen to have sex in order to have a place to stay.
Right.
Or have sex in exchange for food or clothing or different things like that. So that's a lot of how it initially comes about. However, sexual exploitation can come in many, many different forms. And so a few years ago, I founded the Anti-Sexual Exploitation Roundtable for Community Action here for Kansas, though other people from Missouri come to our monthly meetings. And then the Wichita Children's Home has really taken on wanting to serve that population. So I see young people who are sexually exploited usually come through the street outreach program, and then I see them for therapy, as well as I coordinate other sexual exploitation services here at the Wichita Children's Home. So.
What ages? What ages of kids do you see?
Primarily, our focus is working with young people ages 13 through the age of 21. However, we do have that occasional, 8-year-old or 12-year-old.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And you are a numbers girl. You like research and statistics.
I do like research. I'm one of the sick few that do.
No. I respect that gift, and it's a gift. What are the numbers? What are, and both, if you could, nationwide and here?
Well, nationwide, it's very difficult. I mean, a couple people, different researchers have said it's within the thousands. Others will say there's, 1 million trafficking victims in our country. Locally, though, the experts that have come together on this issue and who meet monthly on the Anti-Sexual Exploitation Roundtable for Community Action here at the Wichita Children's Home, they're estimating that there are approximately 500 youth each year who are sexually exploited here just in Wichita, Kansas alone.
Okay. And what are the solutions? And we're talking. I know that's a very broad, general statement,
Mm-hmm.
but we were talking about community psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and that was new to me. And I know enough about psychology to be dangerous. Explain community psychology and basically how you're empowering these kids to help themselves.
Well, I come from definitely a social work as well as a community psychology perspective. And so I think you have to look at the whole entire picture. You have to realize that those young people, whether you're talking about young people who are just basically simply homeless, runaway, throwaway youth, or youth who are sexually exploited, they are experts for their own life situation as well as their own life solution. Right. And so, I don't believe that there's just one answer as to how to solve this issue. I think one thing that Wichita, Kansas in particular needs to look at is that the FBI has deemed cities or states originating cities and states, or destination sites or cities or states, and we're an originating city. We're in the top 5 of originating cities for sexual exploitation. So, meaning that traffickers come here to Wichita, Kansas and take our kids elsewhere. So one of the first things in solving that issue here in Wichita, Kansas is, how do we look at the certain dynamics of our city so that our kids aren't taken to other places. Right. Because once they leave, it's more difficult to rescue them. Right. And to identify who they are. A lot of them will end up in Hollywood, and we can't We can't find them. So I think that that's one thing, but I believe that it's, in speaking on community psychology, we have to do much more prevention. So we need to have earlier education, earlier resources. We need more places for youth, I think in all cities and states, more places that youth are safe and have environments where they can explore who they are, figure out their own values, their morals, identify their dreams, and have just a true community wrapped around them.
We're here at how I found this place is through Safe Place, and we were at lunch and they were talking about the power of the sign. And if you don't know, Safe Place has these signs here. They're at quick stops,
Like quick trips.
Quick trips, and I've seen them on Domino's Pizzas and libraries and police stations and all of the rest. And at lunch they were talking about a girl who was being trafficked, saw the sign, was able to get away from her pimp and called the number, and then was routed to you guys, and you were able to grab her.
Right.
You've been doing this for a while.
Right, over 12 years.
Over 12 years. I need to know your secret to how you stay so youthful. But what are the different reasons? People often say when I do the homeless youth thing, what about their parents? Mm-hmm. What are the reasons that we see kids out there? I know in Hollywood, the one place that I'm associated with said that 40% of kids aren't even reported missing.
Mm-hmm. I believe that everybody's story is different, and I really struggle with this because I think that it's really important, especially for funders and for those in law who make the policies and bills that protect this population. I think it's important for them to see that it can happen to anybody, because I think that the more we glamorize a subject or the more extreme cases that we present, it's more difficult for people to realize that it could happen to them. It could happen to their brother, their sister, their daughter, their son, their niece. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Totally.
But at the same time, I know that there are factors and similarities and themes when you look at risk factors as to why young people end up on the streets. For example, in speaking about sexual exploitation, and just in the local research I've done, as well as looking at literature, doing literature review and national research, about 98% of young people involved in sexual exploitation were sexually abused as children. They were in homes that were just fraught with drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence. So there's this cycle that's continuing. However, there's just that everyday case that, something happens that makes it so that they're on the street and they get separated from their families due to poverty, somebody simply losing their job. So I don't think it would be appropriate to just kind of sum up the similar story.
Well, there was a topic at lunch that came up, and again, if it's if I hit on something that you brought up a very good point that I never thought about, that outreach services and basic prevention and everything is really targeted at Caucasian youth.
Yeah, I do believe that. I think so often. I've been involved in the street outreach work for a long time. I've been to so many national conferences, and I've done a lot of networking, and the majority of the employees are Caucasian across the country, as well as the majority of the clients reached are Caucasian. And I think some of that is because of cultural realities, such as, for example, in our community, the Asian cultures will tend to hang out with their groups, and we'll try to find family or pseudo-family members to stay with. However, I think that if we diversified our employees and really made a push for that, we would also diversify who we were finding. But I think that there would have to be a huge systems change.
Right.
So, because I do believe that our systems were initially created and designed for, primarily Caucasian.
And I mean, there's a gang element even with the what I call gutter punk kids. Mm-hmm. I mean that affectionately as somebody that's literally lived on Hollywood Boulevard, where the insane clown posse and
the juggalos,
which we found out today at lunch. I got a great education at lunch that they actually marketed to that demographic, which I want to. gosh, there's so much. Talk to me about what's going on here at the children's home.
I think Risa will maybe share some more specifically about street outreach, but I think that in terms of collaboration, we're ahead of the game. We've prosecuted, for example, more cases, sexual exploitation cases on our state laws than any other state.
Wow.
Because of our ability to really work together. So again, because we have a great street outreach program, young people who are involved in sexual exploitation are typically identified through street outreach services, or we have our local exploited and missing children's unit, which is a collaboration between law enforcement and our state rehabilitation services. And the EMCU and street outreach workers work very hand in hand to identify young people who are runaway homeless or involved in sexual exploitation. And once identified, there's just a stream of services that can then just get tripped into action in terms of housing, whether that's here in the shelter, whether that's independent living programs. We immediately provide them with a health care examination and checkup. We connect them to legal services, connect them with a case manager who can help them find a job or maybe get connected with their family. We have therapeutic services. Everything's just free and confidential and can happen pretty quickly because of that network of providers that work so well together.
This is all kind of new to me, the human trafficking has actually become a very popular cause, and it's a horrible situation at any level. So please hear what I'm saying. But when it comes to American kids being abused, we seem to ignore that.
Most definitely. The majority of the funding is for international trafficking. We have very little funding for domestic human trafficking, which is just a sad deal. I think sometimes we almost tend to blame the victim more in this domestic sexual exploitation situation because a lot of it does just look like survival sex. So it's easy to maybe claim that they made this choice. Which is part of why I use the term sexual exploitation and not the word prostitution. And I think that that's really key when you look at what we need to do to create systems change in the United States, is that we have to even change some legal definitions. Child prostitution in of itself is an oxymoron. A child cannot be engaged in this crime, which when we say prostitution, it's so easy to then call them a prostitute, which indicates that they had some power or decision-making ability in sleeping with a perhaps 50-some-year-old businessman who's making over $100,000 a year, and they're a victim. And so I think that we really have to start changing the language. We have to be willing to face the fact that this is happening here. And we have to start taking responsibility as a community, as a society, that we all play a role in this sexual exploitation. We, in some way or form, allow the demand to continue. And if there wasn't a demand, sexual exploitation, human trafficking wouldn't continue. But so there's obviously a demand, which means we're all going to have to look at ourselves and adjust that. And
And when there's socioeconomic things that would cause even a family member, we talked about this in the interview yesterday, is a family, mom putting her daughter out there. And that's a society issue. Instead of judging the mom, for that action, which is horrible, I'm not trying to diminish it in any level, but she's in a position where there's no money to maybe feed the rest of the kids. I don't know. I'm just making something up.
And for me, I can't ever excuse a parent exploiting a child. We have a very recent case that's in the media right now of a father and mother who sexually exploited their 1.5-year-old as well as their 3-year-old through the internet and through other media avenues. Just last year we had another case of a mom selling her 5-year-old daughter. That can be the face of the sexual exploitation. Face of exploitation can also be a young teen girl, a 13-year-old, who feels isolated in her family, meets a guy on MySpace who sounds really great, ends up meeting him at the corner and thinking that they're going to go on a date. Next thing she knows, she's in Atlanta being pimped out on Craigslist. So, it's such a vast face of sexual exploitation. You have the typical guerrilla pimp. You have the madame. You have the parents that are another face of the pimp. You know, you have the pornographer. That's another face of the pimp. The pimp does not look the same in every case. It's not always that, you know, typical, stereotypical African American guy in a big hat.
Right.
You know, it's gangs are the new face of the pimp.
Right.
Gangs are replacing the drug and guns trade right now because, and sexual exploitation is the second fastest, most rapid growing criminal enterprise in the world because it's so easy. I mean, I could sell a sack of weed or some coke, meth, whatever drug, one time. It's used up, it's gone. But if you were my drug that I was selling, I could sell you over and over and over and over again. So, I mean, it's pretty, it's a high profit.
Right. Where can somebody go for more resource, for more information on this? I mean, from not the international human trafficking, but on
But
the
more domestic.
Yes.
I would suggest just looking on the website at other youth-serving agencies. Also just looking up human trafficking bills for their state. For example, in our state, we just passed Senate Bill 353, which is our local human trafficking bill. Tapping into their attorney general's websites, hopefully they're doing something in their own state. Here, Derek Schmidt, as well as our Attorney General Stephen Six, they're kind of doing some work on that. Obviously, the Wichita Children's Home site would be great. But in terms of domestic, there's just really not a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, Jim's project would be something really great to look at. That's out of New York.
Now, you have a foundation. How do people support you?
You mean my foundation for the education?
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Well, I am actually in this work because of some of my own experiences of being homeless, being a runaway and homeless youth, being out on the streets, and then just kind of growing up in the system. So it's kind of a neat story, and I've been able to do a lot of consulting around the country. And so I love to then give that money to either put on community-wide education events. So, for example, the Anti-Sexual Exploitation Roundtable for Community Action, on funding that I'll earn doing speaking engagements, will put on larger community education events to inform providers. There's also a foundation at Wichita State University in my name for somebody who's been in the system who would like to earn their master's degree in social work.
Yeah.
So.
And you're getting your doctorate.
I am finishing my PhD, which is really kind of crazy. General education degree, never made it past the 9th grade, and now I'm getting my PhD, so
And that's awesome. So.
It's very exciting. I sometimes have to pinch myself. I think you mentioned at lunch, somebody asked you how your lunch was, and you said, well, I ate out of garbage cans for a long time, so this is amazing, right? And so for me, sometimes I'm just pinching myself, thinking how amazing it is in our country that you really can cross these socioeconomic barriers quite easily. And just like you've gone from eating out of a garbage can to now sitting at a very nice, one of the nicest restaurants in Wichita, Kansas,
Thank you very much.
dipping bread, I think, your story is a testament to this, that you can also go from eating that bread to then eating out of the garbage can. So it goes both ways, and I think that we all have to remember.
You were homeless.
Yeah.
And now you're going to be a doctorate. And that's oh gosh, you've encouraged me so much. I know this is a little off topic, and it was up to you if you wanted to open. Do you think about when you were homeless? And I should say, I remember my last day homeless, and I do it purposely because it drives me, because I never want to be there again. So a lot of the times when I'm going to make a decision, and it could be that bad decision that might take me on that road, I try to remember that last day.
I think for me, rather than just thinking about being homeless, I think about more the larger experience, just because that's kind of what kind of person I am. I'm a big vision person,
Right.
So I'll never forget, and sometimes it's to my detriment, that sometimes I still feel like when I walk in a room of these amazing people wearing beautiful suits, and I'm there to present, I feel like if only they knew who I really was.
Self-esteem.
And I feel like, but I think at the same time, I think that is my gift, and I think I've been able to do a lot of good because of that, because what keeps me driven is that I remember feeling like that and feeling so small. And now I have a very large voice. And so, as I mentioned to you, my spiritual gift is justice. And so I think I'm driven by this sense of, I remember what it was like to not be recognized. And this is why maybe I really dig your title, Invisible People, is I remember what it was like to be homeless for months at a time as a young girl. And nobody was really looking for me. And I was 14 years old on the street. Talk about invisible. And now I'm able to stand in front of 2,000 people at times and give presentations, and I'm not invisible at all. And I know that I'm here because I can help serve as maybe a channel for so many other people who are voiceless.
Right. It's so interesting that you said that, and we're going to close in a second. We didn't plan on getting on this conversation, but I could sit and talk to you all day on a lot of different levels. She was giving me some very candid information about invisiblepeople.tv. I'd love to just listen to her forever. But you mentioned going into an environment where you feel uncomfortable and insecure based on that you felt less than homeless. And I the first time I walked into a house, after being off the streets, I cried because it was like, why would anybody invite me into their house? Mm-hmm. And I often, even though I'm 15 years off the streets, I still do have those feelings of, you're a homeless person. What are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And it's very hard. So.
But I think it's also really cool too to start transitioning to, because you are homeless, you are the expert. And you need to value yourself before anybody else can value you and your expertise and what you have to bring to the table. And I just hope that more people who have been there and done that can serve as maybe a hope for other people. And that doesn't mean that you always get off the streets or that you have a job even. So,
any last words?
I just think it's important to remember that everybody has strengths and resiliencies and gifts. And as social service providers in general, I think it's important that we remember it's not our job to save the young people or any marginalized population, somebody who is currently living on the streets. We need to remember it's not our job to save them, but it's our job to maybe help them recognize and provide them with opportunities to utilize the current strengths and resiliencies that they already have within themselves.
Very cool. And again, I'm here, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, those of you who stuck around, I'm here at the Wichita Children's Home, and the website is wch.org. So if you want to contact them, it's a great organization, and thank you very much for listening to us.